Hey, this is Hunter with Lone Star Woodworking, and in this video, I try out some new joinery methods to make one of the coolest bases I think I'll ever make. And I hope some of you recognize this slab top, because I'm going to try to give it a second life. Now, as a lot of you know, I have been trying to make room in my garage for quite some time. And I had this huge pile of leftover red oak from a previous build. Now, I have been trying to cut up a lot of my scrap wood into pen blanks for these pen makers because they're easy to store, easy to make, easy to ship, and frankly, the pen blanks just really move a whole lot faster than a full-blown table. So I've been doing that, and when I came across this red oak, I was like, red oak really doesn't have the allure that Padauk, Purple Heart, Curly Maple, things like that have to pen makers. And I've had this idea for a base in my head for quite some time, but just never really knew how to start going about building it. And given that I had so much of this red oak, and red oak is relatively cheap, I figured that if I screwed it up and had to throw everything away, well, I really wasn't out that much money because it's red oak. Now, this is the design that I'm going with, this kind of offset triangle. I don't know what drew me to this. I don't know why I thought about this. I just thought it looked cool in my head. I cut a 30-degree angle on one end of each of those sticks and thought this looked pretty cool. So this is what I'm going with. Now, what you're not going to see in this video is the first attempt at building this base. And everything was hooked together with pocket holes and butt joints, and it really wasn't structurally sound, and it's because that glue joint was end grain to end grain, which is the weakest glue joint you could possibly have. So I wanted to figure out a way to make that glue joint a lot stronger. And this is the idea that I came up with, was using half-lap joinery. Now, I have never done half-lap joinery before. I know it's not the most difficult by any stretch of the imagination, but given that I've never done it before and I'm having to make these half-laps on an angled surface, I knew it was going to pose some challenges, so I looked up some videos, figured out exactly what I had to do, and it really wasn't that difficult once I started getting everything going. Now, that first cut was definitely a little bit nerve-wracking, but I asked a few other more experienced woodworkers, and they're like, well, the only good way to do this is to either build a jig that keeps your hands really far away, and if you don't have that capability, use a paddle or something that you can hold it firmly up against the fence with, and keep nice steady pressure. And as you just saw, that's what I went with. Now, like I said, these aren't particularly difficult, and in fact, they're pretty easy to figure out. You cut exactly half of the material off, and then you cut one of those halves off. That's all that's happened here, and I did accidentally make a cut on one of the skinny ends instead of the big end, so that's why that one piece sticks up more than the other two. It's annoying once I have to go fix it, but it's not that big of a deal. Now here I'm cutting the negatives for the half laps to sit in, and I'm just making these ticks right here because I wasn't going to be able to see my lines once I started the cut, and I wanted to be able to just kind of keep going and track my progress. So that's the only reason why I did that. Now, I'm pretty sure that my table saw is designed to take a dado stack, but I don't have any dado blades, and the half laps really weren't that big, and it really didn't take that long. Now, of course, it's not seating down all the way like you see right there, but you know what? For a first attempt, I would say that these turned out pretty nice. Doing a dry run, making sure everything fits together the way I need it to, making sure everything butts up the way I need it to. I wasn't entirely satisfied with the way everything was going together because I definitely did make some bad cuts a couple times, but everything was good enough to where I could hook it together and then fix the little imperfections on it later. Now, for the actual leg portions, I did not want these to be straight up and down. I wanted these to have an interesting look to them and almost this kind of twisting type of look to it. So I put a 45-degree bevel on the face of each of these legs so that I could cut a complementary piece and have it sit at a 45-degree angle. And now I'm cutting this piece right here just to make sure everything sits nice and flat. And I wanted to hook these together with half lap joints as well, simply because, well, it was going to be long grain to end grain, and that's really not a great joint. It's not the weakest joint, but it's definitely not a great joint. So I cut that so that way I could do the half laps on there as well. And you can see here, this is kind of what I was going for. I cut the half lap a little too long, so I went over to my miter saw real quick, cut it down, got everything sitting flat, and I was ready to start gluing everything up. Now, the best part about these half laps, at least in my opinion, is that there's no guessing where to put the glue, and it's really easy to figure out how much to put on, so you don't end up with a gigantic mess everywhere. And there you can see that kind of twisting look that I wanted this base to have with those 45-degree angles that are offset from each other. And now I'm just trying to see if the top is actually going to look good with this. I definitely think this shape of base is more suited to a circular top, but I didn't have any circular tops, and like I said, I'm trying to make room in my garage, so I grabbed this curly pecan that I did from my video titled I Like It, Just Not a Lot, where I tried to use Rubio Monocoat charcoal to stain this pecan black, because oftentimes with these super curly pieces of wood, if you stain or if you dye it all black, it tends to highlight the curls in it really, really well, and it looks freaking awesome. It did not do that with this table. Now, this desk, I put it on Marketplace for, I think, all of 2 weeks, and I eventually was real with myself, and I was like, I hate this. I'm not proud of this, and I really want to redo it. So I cut off most of it. This thing is now, I think, 35 inches long. It was 60. I was kind of upset that I made kind of a dumb mistake, but now I get to use it in this really cool project. Now, with the top not really being the star of this video, all I did was sand off the original finish and then sand everything up to 220. Not that hard to figure it out. Now, there's a couple of gaps that I knew were going to be there. Yes, it's annoying, but I had an idea on how to fix this. I'm just going to camp my table saw at 30 degrees and make a long cut where I have some nice sharp angles. And the idea that I have here is I'm just going to use those sharp angles. I'm going to put some glue into that negative space and then hammer in these kind of homemade wedges. And from there, I'm just going to let everything sit overnight. Normally, I do only let the glue sit for maybe 30 minutes to an hour, depending on how well it's cured up. But because these pieces are so small, and because I know there's not a whole lot of surface area being covered, I'm going to let it sit overnight. And of course, I am one of those people that is steadily learning which hand tools I need, so I don't have a flush cut saw, so I'm using my jigsaw in order to get everything as close to flush cut as I possibly can. This did okay. I'm not terribly happy with the results from it. It did actually tear out some of those pieces, but they were easy enough fixes. From there, it was just sanding everything flat, and these angles did make things kind of difficult, but not so much so that it really impeded the sanding process. Now here I was also trying to test the stability of these legs, because that 45-degree angle was definitely making me nervous, but I was able to step on it, and I'm 275 pounds, and it held up just fine. So that gave me a whole lot of confidence in this design. And here, some of the ends were really uneven, and it was going to look super ugly, and it wasn't going to sit perfectly flat. So what I ended up doing was just cutting those ends off, so that way I didn't have to worry about it in the first place. Now I'm giving every edge just a really easy round over on the sharp edges, because I don't want someone to pick this up and have it hurt their hand because the angles are too sharp. So I'm taking some 180 grit sandpaper and rounding over everything that I can just to soften the feel of it a little bit. Now, I know some of you hate this, some of you like this, some of you didn't even know this was an option. But yeah, I'm using this industrial grade spray paint. It's made to paint metal, wood, houses, whatever you can use it for, and stick. And I haven't really had any issues with any of the finishes on this. I do go back over it and spray it with a lacquer, so maybe that's the key to all this, but I can't be for certain because I'm certainly not a paint expert. But the reason I'm painting this black is because red oak has this really nice grain texture to it, and the black, even though it's this jet black, you can still see those grain features, and I think that's one of the coolest things about using red oak in building furniture. Now, just to keep the bottom of this thing from getting screwed up, I am adding those little padded leg levelers. That was a pretty simple process. And I couldn't really figure out a way to attach the top to the base using my usual method, which is threaded inserts. I'm not very happy with this solution because I absolutely hate drilling screws directly into the slab tops, because eventually you are going to auger out that hole and it won't attach anymore. But this is the best idea I had at the moment. It's the best idea I could come up with after thinking through a couple of different ways to do it. But every other way that I was going to do this, you were going to have these very noticeable and very prominent holes in each of the legs, and I just really didn't want that. Now, something that's kind of important to note here is that I am using Rubio Monocoat without the hardener, and that is something that you are capable of doing. It's not going to prevent it from curing, it's just going to extend the life of that curing process. With that hardener, everything would cure up in about a week, but without the hardener, it takes a full 30 days. So that's a risk that I was willing to take, and is just something that you need to be aware of whenever you're using Rubio Monocoat. Now, after I put finish on this table, I was so upset with myself that I had the audacity to stain this thing black because it looks so freaking pretty. I love the way this curly pecan looks. And one of my last tips when applying Rubio Monocoat, after you get all of the excess off, I usually do come back with another Scotch-Brite pad and I buff in or off whatever little bit of excess you might have left on when wiping everything off with a rag. Now, like I said, I definitely think this base is more aptly suited to a round tabletop. However, I freaking love the way this thing looks. I love the way the base turned out. It was such a simple design. And I hope that all of you take this video and you freaking run with this and you try it and maybe try something new that I could try. So guys, that is going to do it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something, and I really hope to see you next time. See ya.